Pastor Joan will be coming to speak, and I'm not going to share a whole lot about his past because he's going to do that this morning. But you were born in Albania, right? And somehow you made it from Albania and you're here today. So we are so excited to have you and your wife and your children. And so let's give them a warm Fuel Church welcome.
All right. Can you hear me? All right. So I have a name for this now. I was thinking through, and I think this is going to be called my second conscience, this microphone here, okay? Because I was told, listen, this is going to be on. If you mute it or not, it's up to you, right? So I was like, I said, don't go to the bathroom. I'm not concerned too much with that. I'm concerned more with my singing, And so my singing career, I think, has 3 steps. The first step, I think, was when I was about 14, and I saw people up on stage when I was in Albania, and I went to the youth pastor at that time, and I said, hey, I want to learn how to play the guitar. So I did 2 classes, I think, and on the second class, he broke the news to me, and he says, you don't play the guitar, you play with it, so you can't play anymore. So he kicked me out. My second attempt was, back in the day, there was these tapes that were going around back in Europe, and my wife afterwards wanted all these Hillsong CDs, but before that, was it Hosanna or some sort of Shout to the Lord or some sort of tapes, and so I got a hold of this tape, and I listened to it, so I built up my courage. I went to the worship pastor, and I whispered in his ear, I said, I'd like to sing a song in service. And he said, well, she's laughing because, I whispered, the song, and he's like, I think you need a lot more practice. So I withdrew that, and then back maybe a few years later, Bible school, I'm a little bit older now, and so there was a Korean professor at that time that started teaching music, and I signed up for some reason. My wife, she sang her whole life, and she did worship bands and things, and so I built up my courage again, and I signed up. That lasted 1 class. As soon as they started doing this thing, whatever that is, I gave up. I said, I can't do that. So that was I don't know what that is. You guys who do music, whatever. What are they called? No, like the half, whatever is like. Anyways, I just said, this is it. Korean music teacher, I'm done. I'm leaving. That's it. So I walked out. And so I'm sitting here. I'm thinking, boy, like if this is on, we're going to have some trouble here today. So my first conscience is here. My wife's here today. So she's going to make sure I stay on a good path. Second conscience, and the BIMs are here. That's third conscience. So and I think the weather's going to be the fourth. So I'm going to try to keep everybody awake here today. But anyways, I just love being here. So thank you, Pastor Maria and team here. I think this is my 3rd time of visiting here. It was the last time here with Rian, one of my friends. And yeah, I love the communion here today. That was great. I think when we were in Macedonia serving at the church there, the first time we visited, they did have a cup and they did have the bread. What they did with the cup was they actually passed it around for everybody to drink out of it. And so I do tend to have a problem with germs and people drinking out of my cups and things like that. So I'm standing there. We loved the country. It was one of the best times of our life. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this, right? And so I'm thinking, there has to be a way out of this, but I can't. We're, assisting the pastor. We got to be up on stage. We got to put in an effort. I can't just not take communion. It's a small church. Somebody's going to be writing down, Johan didn't take communion. What sins did he commit? All right, so I build up my courage. I find a way out of this. My way out of it was to volunteer to serve communion. Because the guys that serve communion get to stand up front and take a sip first. So when I saw the cup there, I said, oh no, I'm 6th in line. What am I going to do? So thank you for just doing it. I do appreciate that. So I can't tell you. Now I know that that's a holy moment, but when the cup makes its way to the 20th person, the maps start forming in the wine, there's some sort of transformation that starts happening there. So there is something that happens, I'm telling you. Joy. Anyways. So I love being here. I remember the first time, or one of the first times I spoke was in the small villages in Croatia, and I didn't really speak the language very well. I picked it up since that point, but at that time my wife was my translator. And so we had this elderly couple that would take us in the small villages. I don't know where it was, in the middle of nowhere, some small old Baptist church. And so, you're young, you're like, I can do this, were we married at that point? I can't remember. Anyways, she was with me, and I get up. It's all these older people. And I start speaking, and she looks at me. My wife's here. She's like, I can't do it. I'm going to be sick. And she just walks out. Okay. I don't speak the language. What am I going to do? Anyways, but those churches are meeting in Croatia today. There's churches meeting in Macedonia, where our oldest son was born. There's churches meeting all over the world. And it's just an amazing thing that God does, that he shows up everywhere. He shows up everywhere. And so for the last year or so, I've been working with this organization called Every Home for Christ. And just a sliver of what God is doing around the world, in the last 75 years, over 2 billion gospel presentations have gone out only from this organization. 17.5 million positive responses, 25,000 Christ groups or small churches planted, 5.3 million Bibles distributed, and this year alone, out of churches in the world, over 116,000 people have gone door to door. Church members, Christians like ourselves, have gone out and knocked on doors and talked to people. And so that just kind of gets me excited. I had a text from one of my friends in Macedonia. He texted me yesterday. He said, hey, greetings from Albania. We're in the small village in Albania. We're going to preach to these people in Albania, And, we're meeting with these people and all and this and that. And it's just amazing what God does everywhere, that God shows up everywhere. And there is this statistic. I don't know if it's shifted or not, but if there would be 100 Christians represented here today from all over the world, 26 of them would be from Africa, 24 would be from Latin America, 23 would be from Europe, 15 from Asia, 11 from North America, and 1 from Oceania. Oceania? Something like that. So God's working everywhere. God's working all over the world. God's working in the Middle East. God's working in Europe. God's working in the darkest places of this earth. And so part of that amazing story is how our family is here today. So the easiest way I explain this is, beyond my very thick Texas accent that I have, that I can't be figured out, is people will say, how'd you get here? And I'll say, well, we did win the lottery. They're like, wow. As a matter of fact, my wife put in for some other sort of lottery here this week. I think everybody's doing it for some sort of house. So they've been talking about it. Because she said, we won the lottery once. So we did win the lottery. It's a lottery that the United States does every year. And people from all over the world get to come. And so I remember the day of the interview. We went to the American Embassy. We were living in Macedonia at that time. We had one son. He was 2 years old. And so we show up, and we're standing at the counter, and the official behind it says, all right, tell me about yourselves. And so I said, well, I am born in Albania, and I live in Macedonia now. I have married a lady that's from Croatia, but she's actually Serbian. Our son was born here. He doesn't know what he is. He's confused. And we, since then accumulated another 2 boys. So Robbie's here and Josh is somewhere in children's class today. And so I do remember one of the very interesting moments in my life was me and my wife actually go back a little bit. I became a believer in Albania. Then the church decided that they don't have enough leaders. So they sent the first shipment of Albanian guys to the United States to get trained and learn the Bible, come back and serve. Guess what happened? Didn't come back. So the second shipment, which I was part of, they said, yeah, that didn't work out well. Let's send these guys to a place that they might want to come back. And so at that time, it was Croatia, which was 1990s early so. And if some of you remember, that was the time in Yugoslavia that there was a big war and it just had finished. So they did ship me there. And so the pastor sits me down. He said, listen, I only have one thing to tell to you. We're sending you there. Just don't get married. I said, yes, I have no intention of getting married. I have the intention of going to Bible school and then coming back and ministering here. I go to Bible school. 3 months later, I meet somebody. 6 months after that, we get engaged. And a couple of years later, we get married. And so we get married. In that period before getting married, I had to go back and serve in the church in Albania. And I remember the war started, I think in Kosovo at that time, because that's how we do things. Every couple of years, we start a war. And so I remember that, there's chaos everywhere. And because Europe is so small, you can actually feel and see planes flying to bomb countries next to you and all of that stuff. And so I don't remember if it was either a phone call or a letter, because at that time we weren't doing emails, where my wife says, listen, I don't know if this is very important to you, but I'm actually Serbian. And as she's saying that, you can correct me, but I think that's the story I'm sticking with. There's planes flying across, and there's wars and things happening. Anyways, that's kind of why we find ourselves here. We ministered in Macedonia for a few years, a small country in Europe, and after that we landed in the States. We've been here for about 12 years. So we do have 2 kids that can run for president. The oldest one can't, but the other 2 can, so there you go. And really, I thought about this, and I said, the reason why we're here and the reason why all of us are here is that there's a few things that matter to God. And so Pastor Maria asked me for a title. I'm not a big titles person, but I did come up with a title. I hear that sometimes you don't come up with such great titles for your sermons. So I decided to beat you. So my title for today is Every ... matters. So I wanted to bring something to maybe cause some commotion. Now, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going where you think I'm going with this, okay? Just so you know. But there's a few things I think that matter to the heart of God that place us all here today at this time. Babies, middle-aged people, young people, older people, that places us all over here. And the first thing that matters to God is prayer. And so the first thing is every prayer matters to God. I know that here in America, I've learned that through the years, we are very, let's go get it done people. Like, let's go do something, let's go build something, let's go, If you're in ministry, that gets even more complex and you feel like you always have to do something. Part of what you have to do is listen and not do something, right? Because you're like, well, how can we fix this? There has to be a way to fix it. And so we tend to sometimes move away, and there's this, you're going to get a lot of Eastern European stuff today here, okay? So I apologize in advance, and the BIMs are going to hear stories that maybe they've heard before, so I apologize to you about that as well. But there's this little joke that they say about people in Eastern Europe, because generally we don't tend to be very action-oriented people, we kind of tend to lay back. And so there's a Japanese person and an Eastern European person on the plane, and the plane starts going down, and the Japanese guy says, we got to do something. We got to fix something. We got to... And the Eastern European guy lays back and says, why do you always have to do something? Just sit and relax. Anyways, dark Eastern European humor. But every prayer matters to God. The reason why we find ourselves here today is that prayer matters to God. We can't do things in our own strength. I have talked to Pastor Maria, and I've heard things that you guys do, the big braid and things like that. I heard that the grill didn't work last time you guys were out. So sometimes you got to pray over the grill so that the fire comes out. I don't know. But we can't count on our own strength. That's what we learn. Back at home, you generally don't count on your own strength because nothing works the way it's supposed to work. And so you go to get a passport. You got to pray, Lord, line everything up, please. Line everything up, please, Here, you just go to the post office, you give your paperwork, and the passport magically appears in the mail a couple of weeks later. Now it's 6 months, but Anyways, and so we can't do things on our own. Part of my story is, we're going to go back a little while ago. My grandfather, in the 50s, he was part of a group of people that was arrested. So we're talking communist Albania here now. He got arrested with a bunch of other people, and he ended up in prison for 1 year. That caused a cascade of events in our lives, my family's life, to where fourth generation is actually in America. They don't live in Albania because of that. He ended up in prison. My dad couldn't go to school because of that. And then he couldn't have a place to live until we were fairly old. When I was there, I had to leave. I moved to Macedonia, then I moved to the States. And so the fourth generation of the Qesteris is actually here in the States. And I grew up in a country that was very dark. In 1967, Albania declared that God is dead. You know, they had pictures of the youth going into churches and burning everything down. They completely eliminated every single priest, Catholic, Orthodox, every Muslim imam. They exterminated to where in 50 years there was nobody left. There are stories of Mother Teresa. She grew up in Albania. She went to school there. Her best friend was put in a sack with a cat, and the cat was beaten, so the cat clawed her to death. This is in the 1960s. In 1967, the communist leaders came up and said, first country without God, what are you going to do about it? By 1976, they declared that everybody that had a name that didn't sound Albanian had to be changed. And so, if you don't change it, we'll change it for you. Every single religious proclamation was declared illegal. Couldn't do anything. As a matter of fact, they would come to priests that wanted to baptize babies, and they would say, hey, you need to baptize my baby, I'm Catholic, and they would catch the priests while they're baptizing and throw them in prison. And so the country spiraled into hopelessness year after year after year after year. By the time I was born, there was no food. By the time I was born, there was no clothes for people. I remember a time when me and my sister, we had one set of clothes. I'd go in the early morning shift in school, she would go in the afternoon. And so you end up in this hopeless situation that you don't seem to be able to come out. There's stories of missionaries that, got picked up, and there were stories of people that tried to get into the country, all sorts of plans. I mean, there was people that were being trained to go and kill our leader, to go and kill the guy that died in 1986, who was our dictator for 42 years, one of the longest living dictators in the world. He would catch everybody that came in the country, and nobody could do him anything. Not the CIA, not the local people, anybody. And so the whole country ends up in this spiral of hopelessness. And things seem, just there's nowhere to go. What are you going to do? No plan of man can succeed. Nothing that you think of, nothing happens. And so I've been reading about actually that on the other hand, there was groups of 10 people, 15 people in the UK, in America that started praying for Albania. And I believe it's because of those prayers that our country shifted around, because there was no human mind that could orchestrate what happened and the fall of communism and everything else that happened after that. It was particularly because prayer mattered. Every prayer matters to God. I did put Matthew 7 and 8 here as a bookmark for that. And it says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds. And to the one who knocks, the door will be opened. How do you open doors that have been locked for 50 years? Where people don't remember anymore who God is. Where people don't remember what their names and what they were called anymore. And I truly believe that prayer changes these things. And I know that we tend to say we're going to fix it, right? We're going to do this. But the first step, I think, is to pray. And that continuous step during and before doing things is to pray. The second thing I wanted to talk about is that every believer matters. John 20, 19 to 23. It was the first day of the week, and that very evening, while the disciples were together with the doors locked for the fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them. He said, "Peace be to you." And after he said this, he showed them his hands and his side, and the disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord. Again, Jesus said to them, "Peace be with you. As the Father sent me, also I am sending you." It's very interesting, right? It's in the middle of this chaos for the disciples' lives. Jesus just crucified. They still don't understand. If you read that chapter a little bit further up, it says they still didn't understand. They went to the tomb. It's empty. There's clothes there. And they're like, we don't know what's happening. What happened to dividing the kingdom? So they're locked up in a room. This is not the strongest people that you can find at this point. They're scared for their lives. They're hiding. And so, boy, Jesus shows up. Now, if Jesus showed up, I would expect him to be like, okay, let me explain to you what happened. Let me counsel you a little bit. Don't be afraid. Everything's good. I have a plan. Sit down, have a drink, have some coffee. Let's figure this thing out. He took this group of confused people and he says, I'm sending you out. There's no time left. You guys that are in the middle of this what's happening thing, I'm sending you out. We should know and believe that every single one of us needs to be actively involved in going out to our communities, to our people, and I know you guys do that, and now you use all sorts of methods to do that. And here's the interesting thing. I have lived in a handful of countries right now since I was 17 years old. I have seen other groups, other communities, other religious communities do certain things, practical things, better than possibly Christians do. If you go in the Muslim villages, man, they'll take care of every single poor and orphan. They will start businesses for people that don't have income. Anything you want, they'll do. While Christians don't really see some of these needs, and you're like, we got to do things better than them. But there's one thing, and one thing only, that the church has been called to that nobody else can do. No organization, not every home, no other group of people, that anything, the only thing that the church has been called to do and is supposed to do is to reach out and proclaim God. Nobody else can do that but the church. Nobody else. Other groups can be maybe better at doing humanitarian aid, counseling, fixing homes, anything like that that can beat our hand. But the church's mandate is to reach out. No replacement for that. I talked about this a little while ago, and some people got upset. But we can't pay politicians to do the church's work. We can't. It's impossible. There is one mandate that Jesus gave the church. Go as the Father sent me. Go and make disciples. Everything else is secondary. It can be done, but I'm telling you right now, the only thing that we're called for is to reach out and proclaim the kingdom of God. In 1991 is where my faith journey starts. I say it this way. If an alien ship had landed, I could have explained it better than what I experienced the first time I went into a church building. We had been brainwashed so badly that I was scared to go into a church. Somebody said, listen, there's these people gathering together. They're from America. You should go and participate. I said, I'm not crazy. They told us that churches are for dead people, that churches are places where people get to get buried. We don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. There was no way for me to be convinced that that was a place that I needed to go. The only reason why I went is because some believer, now, I don't remember who these people are. I would love to, but there was a dad and 2 boys that came on a mission trip from the States. And they said, you know what? Do you want to hear about God? That is the only positioning of the church. Nobody else could have done that but believers. We find ourselves here, my family finds ourselves here today because somebody, and I don't say this to maybe make you feel good about yourself, but as believers, you are destiny makers and destiny changers. My story would have gone something like this. When communism fell in 1990, my mom, and this happened, took my hand and said, we're going to go discover our religion that your grandfather believed in. And that was Islam. My mom came from a Muslim family. Her family still is all Muslim. She grabbed my hand and said, let's go. We're going to find it. So I remember she took me, I was about 12, took me to the mosque. We met the head imam. And I don't remember what he said, but I remember he handed me a Quran. We took the Quran, we went home, and for the next few years, we started fasting. I loved that, man. Not the fasting, the food afterwards. All the good food comes afterwards. So we started doing that. That would have been my journey. So what would have happened? I wouldn't have gone to Bible school. I wouldn't have met my wife. I wouldn't have moved here. The whole destiny changes. And so I tell this to people all the time. You go on a small mission trip somewhere, you're a destiny changer. I know you might think this is irrelevant. You speak a word over somebody, you're a destiny changer of bringing people in the kingdom of God. The church is the only one that can do that, and every believer matters. No matter how big, how old, how small, how powerful, how powerless you feel, how wounded you are, where you are from, what your political beliefs are. We can go on, but you are a destiny changer. The third thing is every method matters. And I love this, okay? This is going to get funny now. So I'm going to wake you up now, all right? The 1 Corinthians 9 to 19:23, Paul talks about how he's free and, he has made himself a slave to everyone. But to the Jews, he became a Jew. To the people under the law, he became a person under the law. To the people without law became, to the weak, he became weak. To the strong, he became strong. He goes on and on with this narrative, okay? And everywhere around the world, we see all sorts of methods of people going in and bringing out the gospel. I'm going to tell you what happened to us. When my dad was young, Albania had locked down. There was jammers all around the country. No radio waves, TV waves could come in the country. They didn't want anything to come in but whatever propaganda was being done. As a matter of fact, I remember the only show on TV was a show called Peoples and Nations, where they would show how bad New York City was. Okay, it's real in drugs, people are shooting each other, there's violence. Like, who wants to live like this? You want to live in this paradise that we call Albania. This is where you want to live. And so we were closed in. However, my dad somehow found a way to listen to a radio. So Italy is very close to Albania, about 60, 100 miles, something like that. And so he would go into a room, turn on the radio, and it's one of those old radios where it says like Paris and Rome and whatever, you can just tune in like that. So you tune into, I think, Rome, and he discovered the best music in the world. And that music is country music. Now, my dad is a connoisseur of country music. When I moved to the States, I thought, surely I've hit the jackpot. He will love me forever. I'm going to bring him all the country music in the world. So I start bringing him, throw me some names of new people. I bring him CDs. He's like, what is this? This is no good. This is not country music. This is pop. What is this? I said, Dad, I don't know what to do anymore. He's like, this is what you have to listen to. And I think when Daniel, my oldest, has been there a couple of times, he'll be like, Daniel, come here. And I mean, it's this old banjo stuff that we're like, what? No, this is not good music. This is not good music. So he tunes in, and, obviously you couldn't have the volume high, so he's keeping his ear to the radio. And he hears English. Now, he doesn't speak English. So he digs out vocabulary that his dad was a translator. That's why he ended up in prison, because he spoke different language. So he picks up a dictionary, and starts writing down words. So loves country music, somehow ends up in France, pirates about 2,000 tapes of old Waylon Jennings and whatnot, comes back and teaches me English. Now, there's something funny that happens when somebody that hasn't met an English speaker teaches his kids English. That's how I learned English. Okay? So there was a few mysteries and mystery phrases, one of which I discovered recently, and that is what a Louisville Slugger is. I was speaking at a church in San Diego a few weeks ago, and funny enough, that's what we brought as a present, because the pastor had wanted the Louisville Slugger, so we brought him that. So I talked about this, because my dad would never know what a Louisville Slugger is. Now, he knows where Louisville is. He possibly knows a slugger, but he doesn't know what the two words together are, right? And so finally, after many years, somebody made a song about taking a Louisville Slugger to the headlights, scratching with a... There you go, right? She demolishes his car, scratches it with the keys, and some sort of thing like that. So as that song came in the radio, that is when I discovered what a Louisville Slugger is. So one of the biggest joys of my life was calling my dad and saying, "Dad, I finally know what a Louisville Slugger is." And the method for me coming into the church was somebody says, "Listen, I know we've studied English for such a long time. There is a group of Americans that are doing something we don't know with guitars up on stage. They speak English. Do you want to come over?" And I did. I learned that some words don't mean what they mean, and others mean what they don't mean. Yep. Right? I learned that how you doing doesn't warrant an explanation. You just say good. You don't say my hip hurts. My mom is sick. They just don't care about that after that. All right? I learned that if they compliment your shoes or your hat, you don't give them to them. I was in a coffee shop the other day, and this lady has this big old hat, brown with things on top, and this other lady walks by and she's like, "I love your hat." Now, where I come from, I'd be like, "It's my hat. I'm not giving this. Do you want one?" Like, I would say, "Yeah, man, like, I bought it over there. There's more. Like, don't ask me about my hat." The answer here is, "Thank you very much." And you move on. One of the toughest things, man, was they'll be like, "Help yourselves." What do you mean, help myself? I'm at your house. It's your food. Give me a plate. How much do I need to take? I'm a teenager. I don't know, 15 pieces of chicken? How much do I need? How much is there no judgment for? And so, as Albanian youth, where the missionaries would be like, "Potluck, bring what?" No, you come to somebody's house and they hand you a plate and you eat what they give you. And so you learn all of these phrases. The thing that gets me is I go to the bank here, still confusing. "Do you have any plans for the weekend?" What do you care? I'm not telling you. You already know how much money I have. You want to come to my house? Like, I'm not telling you what plans. Also, there's 5 other people behind me. I'm not telling you my plans. But you have to be nice, right? If you're in ministry, even more so. You got to be like, "Yeah, great plans. I'm going to take this." And, at that point, they disconnected. They don't care. They're like... So, English was our attraction. Anyways, I'm not going to say. My dad learned English with a British dictionary, so some words don't match. So I'm not going to say that because you might put this online or something. So I'm going to stop here. There's stories of things happening in Albania because the country was so closed. There were people in Yugoslavia throwing materials down rivers, throwing brochures, Bibles, booklets, so people could get a hold of the gospel. there was people that were trying to come in as tourists in Albania, and I actually took my kids to this. There's a museum now of communist history there, to where they have a chair that was called the foreigner's barber chair. So if you come in and you don't fit what the communists want, they'll cut your hair. Funny enough, this bone here used to be called the Communist Party's bone, because that's how high your hair needed to be, no longer than that. And so people would go through all sorts of stuff. There's stories of people coming in and they'd have to shave and clean up and put the right clothes. There's like a big declaration when you entered Albania that said, long dresses, no good. Short dresses, no good. T-shirts, no good. Jeans, very bad. Long hair, very bad. If you have any of this, you can't come into our country. So missionaries are trying to come, or people are trying to come through all sorts of ways and means. And I love this story from Every Home for Christ. There's a particular guy that was going up in Bhutan. We actually have his shoes displayed in our office, and they're completely torn because he walked, or I think it was Nepal. And he goes home to home and knocks at the door and says, hey, I have some news for you. I have a little book for you. Do you want to take this book? And there's a guy that's sick laying down in bed, and he says, no, I'm too sick. I can't get up. He's like, but I want to give you this book. Can you take this book? And he says, well, I can't take the book. I'm sick. He says, well, if I pray through the door and you get healed, next time I come by, will you let me in? He says, sure, I'll do that. So the guy prays for him. Comes back next time, the guy's healed. And this is the guy that got healed that used his shoes to reach out hundreds and hundreds of villages. Every method. I mean, I know that the BIMs have journeyed with me and a few other people for a while, and we've heard stories of people in China where you can't raise your voice in worship. And when I work with some organizations in the Middle East, you're hiding memory sticks, different ways to get things. And so every method matters. So if the English country music method works, I don't know what wouldn't. The other one is every place matters. Every place matters. I have this little exercise that I do. Wherever I go, I'll look up for a Middle Eastern restaurant or international restaurant of some sort. So when I was in California this couple of weeks ago, Saturday night, I look up, and I was like, oh, great, I found one. There's this international row of restaurants. One of them was an Iranian restaurant. So I walk in, some older gentleman's there by himself. It's late at night because I got in late, and I'm sitting there. I don't like eating by myself. This is another interesting thing. I think when you're in Eastern Europe, you don't eat alone because people be like, oh, man, I feel so sorry for that guy. You know, why is he alone? Does he have no family? And so I'm still kind of in that mindset. You know, people here do that all the time, right? You go to a restaurant, there people are eating by themselves. And so I'm sitting there all embarrassed, just me. And so this guy comes and says, oh, welcome, first time here. I said, yeah, you know. And all this time, before that, I'm thinking, what am I going to tell this church? Where should we go? Are we going to the Middle East? Are we going to some place that's closed? How are we going to go hidden and all of that stuff? I realized at that point, after talking to this older Iranian gentleman, that you don't have to go far. You just have to go to the restaurant across the street. So I had this conversation with him. I said, just bring me what you want. I don't know. Just bring me I don't want to order like fish, and fish is horrible. And I'm going to get poisoned. Give me what he says, I'll bring you hummus. Hummus is the best one in San Diego. I said, bring me hummus. So by the time he brought everything, I had like 15 plates of things. I couldn't eat anymore. I mean, I'm crying. So he comes and he's like, did you like it? I said, yeah, I'm crying because I love it. You know, I'm crying because I can't fit anything more in my stomach. I said, I love it. And he's just like, oh my gosh. He says, come back tomorrow. So I finish speaking at the church and I tell the pastor, I know where we're going to lunch tomorrow. So we go back to the same place. And the guy's just so happy we're there. So happy. And we sit down. The church has been there for 20 years. The restaurant has been there for 12 years. And yet they have never met. And we're making these plans to go on mission trips all around the world. And yet there's a small Iranian restaurant right next to the church that you can go to. Every place matters. We're here, my family's here because a tiny place called Albania with 2 million people matters to God. Think about the place you're from. That place matters to God. You read in the Bible about all of these encounters, Jesus talking to people on trees and in the temple, in the pools, trying to get cleaned up, all of that sort of stuff. If Jesus and God cares about a small place like Albania, how many of you have heard about Albania? I was going to put up a slide. There's a Simpsons episode back in the 80s about Albania. They put the American Albanian flag on. You know, nowadays, if I say I'm from Albania, they're like, yeah, I've seen the movies Taken, go away. Don't talk to my daughters. Some pop references there. But if I stand here because of that, then God cares for every place on earth and every place matters. Downtown Monument, I don't know where your parade is going to be. Matters. This place matters. Every single place matters. Places of hurt, places of joy, brokenness, places where people have no hope, all of that matters. The last thing that I wanted to share about is that every person matters. It's been a confusing week for some. It's been a great week for others. I'll let you figure that out on your own. Some people are happy and victorious. Others are sad this week. Others are protesting in anger. Some are celebrating. There's this story in Acts 10. I'm not going to read all of it. 10:34 to 35 is kind of the summary of that. But it's where Peter is struggling so hard, right? There is a guy, a Roman centurion. His name is Cornelius. God just comes to him and says, listen, man, I know who you are. You're going to go over there, and you're going to tell this guy that he needs to tell you about me. Very easy, simple story. Man, and Peter is just like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this, right? The big tarp or whatever, cloth comes down from heaven, and there's all sorts of bad animals. My mom, growing up Muslim, didn't like pork, so I know what that is. I have seen her cook pork only once. And this is how it happened. She knocks, my dad, because he's an Orthodox background Christian, that's what he was, says, for my birthday, and this is many years ago, I want to eat pork chops. She said, there's no way. He's like, please, I want pork chops. So, goes to the market. The door opens, and I see this stick. There's a long stick. It's a broomstick. At the end of it, there's a bag tied. At the other end, my mom's walking with a stick. She's bringing in pork chops. She won't touch it. Now, my sister was old enough to cook because I think that's who cooked it. So my sister made it, and then my mom took very good care to throw out everything. All the pots, the broom, the bag, everything that this was made on. Now, it's not because she was observing at the time, but that's just how she was used to. I know how bad this is for this type of things to come. So Peter is struggling. He's like, I'm not eating that. I'm not eating that. I spend my whole life being clean for you. My whole life, I'm not going to sacrifice now. Why now? And we see this kind of like difference where Cornelius is like, I got it. I understand. I want to go talk to this, and this guy's going to tell us all about God. We've done a couple of things. We've been kind to people. We've given, but this guy's going to, I got it. He sends out his people. The people go to track, and God gives him so specific of an instruction. This is the amazing thing about this story. He's like, you go to this house, that house, talk to this guy's by the sea, and he's living with this other guy. And so these guys show up, but Peter, man, he's not having it, right? Because he didn't want to talk and deal with people he didn't like. He didn't want to make himself dirty. So he struggles 3 times, right? The tarp comes down 3 times. And he's just like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. All the way to the end of the story. So it's the whole Acts 10, and you can read it. I love it because it's like a drama, right? He's like, I'm not doing it. I'm doing it. So then these guys bring him, and he actually says at the end, he says, listen, I came here because I wanted to, okay? Like, you didn't make me come. Just so you know. But he has this revelation in verse 34 and 35. And it says the following. I now truly understand that God does not show favoritism, but welcomes those from every nation who fear him and do what is right. He has sent the message to the people of Israel, proclaiming the gospel of the peace through Jesus Christ, who is Lord of all. There's an interesting piece when we first started going to church. Now, my mom's been the hero of faith, the champion of faith to this day. She calls me and she says, "Are you going to church?" I'm like, "Mom, I'm a grown man." She's like, "Yeah, but are you going to church?" I was like, "Okay, yeah, I'm going, okay," And since I was a kid, she'd be like, "You got to get up, go to church." Our excuse in the beginning, because she didn't go to church at that time, would be like, "What do you care? You don't go to church yourself." She'd be like, "No, you got to go to church." Okay, so that's been like the person that wanted us to go to church. So one day she tells me and my dad, she says, "You got to go to church with him." My dad's like, "Nah, it's okay." My dad had been traumatized from his dad being in prison, and they always thought that the communists are going to make a comeback and everybody's going to go back to prison and they're going to not have food and they're going to be persecuted again. So he just didn't want to hear it. He said, "Well, your son's going to church, you got to go with him." So he's like, "Okay, fine, I'm going to go, I'm not going to fight." So he takes me, it's like a Wednesday night, walks in. First guy he sees is a guy who was part of the secret police who had condemned people to death for years. For years. He knew, because it was a small city, everybody knew who everybody was. Everybody knew they knew everything. This guy's in the church. So he looks at me and he says, "I can't do this. This guy, he's evil. This is what he's done. This is what he's done to these people. And he has names. I can't do this. I can't do this." How do you deal with that? You expect to see him somewhere else, but in the church? Serving communion, he was an elder. Now, the backstory of that is that guy had been following the missionaries when they came, and he had become a believer through the missionaries that he was following as a secret police. We didn't know that. We just saw it, and he's like, he said, "These guys are even here. They're even in the church." How do you deal with that when you have people you don't like? And we are in this time now where we don't like people. People don't like us. People want to burn things down, and people want to hate, and people want to take things. And how do you deal with that? It's a struggle that Peter had, but it's a struggle that we have today. But here's the tough truth, is that every person matters. Every person matters. Doesn't matter who they are. Doesn't matter if they look worse than us or better than us or different hair color. This is the truth. Everyone matters to God. The bad people, the good people, everybody matters. So we have to come to terms with that. I hate to leave you like that, but we have to come to terms with that. I matter. I didn't think I would. Who would care for a little kid in Albania? If I matter, everyone does. Those unborn babies matter, but those living grown people matter as well. And so, this is what makes the kingdom of God such an incredible place. If I grew up in Islam and would be in it, everybody needs to look the same. Women have to be covered, men have to have beards, they have to have short, they have to look a certain way, they have to speak the same religious language, you have to learn your prayers in Arabic. But this is where our faith is different, that everybody can be different. And the promise is that there's going to be all of these nations dressed differently and singing all sorts of songs. And that's why everybody matters. So I'm going to close with this. Are we okay? All right. I struggled with this because I said, I love this. I love that every prayer matters, every believer matters, every method, every place, every person. But what is God telling me to tell you today? And here's it. Here's the thing that God said. You, Fuel Church, are enough. You are enough and you are it. And God has placed you here today. Through your sufferings, through your challenges, through disappointments, But he has put you in this place because you're enough for him. You're enough to meet everything that he wants of you. You're enough. You don't need anything else. You have the heart. I've seen you guys operate. I've seen your losses that you're still reeling from. But this is it. Our story here is that we're enough. If these weird people from Eastern Europe land in Colorado Springs, and God can use them, everybody else that is a believer in a community and a church is enough to do what he wants and to see every place and person in the world. So I appreciate you guys bringing me here today. I just want to pray here in the end. And I'm going to pray what Jesus talks to his disciples and says to his disciples in John. And he says, peace be with you. Now, if you go and analyze that, in Greek, peace, the word there is peace that means everything's settled, the economy's settled, justice has been done, all that. You can go look that up. But Jesus says, peace be with you, so I've settled it. And actually, it's a common Middle Eastern and Judaic and all of that greeting. Peace be with you. So, Father, thank you for your peace. And as you were sent by the Father, Jesus, we are expectant as you send us to the world. Father, we look forward as you send us for a 4th of July parade, and we're expectant as you send us into our communities and people we don't necessarily want to hang out with. Father, we pray that you send us to every broken place in this world. Father, we know that you have equipped us with everything to reach this world. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the original Fuel Church YouTube and being a part of what we're doing here at Fuel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you enjoyed what you heard today, share it with a friend. And if you'd like to support Fuel and Fuel International, information to do so will be in the description below. Have an awesome day. Look forward to seeing you soon.